Hello and welcome to Zero Camp's Warmachine Mark IV Army Spotlight and Overview series. Today we'll be looking at Dusk, House Callus. House Callus are a bunch of undead vampire goth elves trying to atone for their past and help stop the Orgoth invasion. Sure, not everyone trusts them because they have a murderous past and sometimes they have to feed on the ranks of the soulless elves around them, but that's not so bad, right? House Callus is fast-moving and slippery in combat. They're hard to pin down, and when they get to the front lines, they can be one of the hardest hitting armies in the game. They can be built out to run jack-heavy lists, unit-heavy lists, or strike a balance. They have a great range game, but also have some of the hardest hitting melee around. Let's start this off by looking at the three starting casters for House Callus. First, we have Hazaroth, Narcisser of Ruin. Hazaroth is a death dealer bringing ruin to whatever he can get his hands on. He can cut himself to keep his units alive when they should have died. He can suck the life essence out of the things he kills. His feat heals all of his warjacks and powers them with magic from the dark. He gives his battle group a speed boost while also buffing his own armor. And he can give his battle group stealth and debuffing the opponent's armor at the same time with Shadowmancer. Hazaroth is going to want to run a beast-heavy list to make the most use of his feat and spell list while also using some key units and support solos that can stand on their own. Next, let's turn to Heleth, Sire of Nightfall. Heleth always has an assassination threat on the board and makes anything you put on the table better than they should be. Field Marshal Truesight allows her jacks to see all the things they shouldn't. Her two Magelock pistols hit way above that power suggests with Life Trader and boosting. Her feat reduces the defense and armor of your opponents while simultaneously buffing yours. Admonition allows for some out-of-activation movement to extend threats or to escape assassination runs against you. And Fire Group extends the range threat of Heleth and her warjacks. To make the most use of her feat, you'll usually run a more infantry-heavy list while also taking a few jacks kitted specifically to make use of True Sight and Fire Group. Lastly, we'll look at Tyrus, Nis Arseer of Spiders. Tyrus has a deadly melee assassination threat that can stretch 13 inches and will bully his way to win the long game. Arcane Vortex keeps the enemy spells off of you, and his Necromantian can refuel his magical focus pool. Pair that with his spell Flashing Blade, where he can make multiple attacks by spending one focus, and he can sling spells for days. He also has one of my favorite spells in the game, Stranglehold. Stranglehold makes it so whatever you damage with it has to forfeit either their combat or movement the following turn, allowing you to completely stop an incoming threat. Lastly, his feat extends the threat range of everyone nearby and gives the Ghostly to navigate the battlefield with ease. Because of all of this, Tyrus can be built with any type of list as his feat works for all jacks, units, and mercenaries. Now we can turn to one of the highlights of Mark IV Warmachine that sets it apart from previous versions, the included spell rack for each of the armies. Each of the casters gets to take 2 to 3 additional spells off of the list, so it's worth a second to look at what it does for us. The common theme of the House Callus spell rack is death. Since you get to pick these spells after you know what your opponent is playing, you can use the rack to answer questions you may not otherwise be able to. Abyssal Gate lets you move your opponent's models, bringing them closer to the maw or out of a scoring position. Backlash is a slow burn against your opponent's Warcaster. Battle Lust makes any warrior model or unit hit way above their point cost by adding an extra die to all melee damage rolls. Black Talons is one of the few ways you can help your army hit their targets. Curse of Shadows allows you to reduce enemy armor, but also lets you move through your opponent's models. Deceleration gives an army-wide armor buff against ranged attacks. Ghost Walk allows you to get wherever you want to go and threats things you shouldn't be able to. Inviolable Resolve is a nice armor buff for a model or unit that also stops them from being bullied on the table. Mirage lets a model or unit threaten farther and disengage when needed with an out-of-activation movement. And Revive is a solid spell to bring dead models back to the table to fight again. We've seen a few casters in the spell rack, now let's dive into what a starting 30-point list might look like, using just the models from the starter box. Our scout caster in the starter box is Heleth, Sire of Nightfall. We're going to tentatively rack Inviolable Resolve and Ghost Walk, but swap as needed at the start of the game. We'll take a heavy and a light built with range in mind to make use of Hellas abilities and spells. The Eidolon will get the Force Barrier Head, Force Fist right arm, Dusk Blade left arm, and Force Cannon on the back. Our light Gast will get the Arknote head to extend our spells, and then the Blaster Fist on the right and the Force Lash on the left. We'll finish the models with a unit of Soulless Hunters. For her command cards, we'll take High Alert for some added protection, Infiltration to help deliver, Old Faithful for the Jacks, Power Swell for the added magical resource, and True Inspiration to help keep the Hunters alive. After learning the ropes, we can move on to a 50-point army that might look like this, still only using the starter box models. We've got Health, Sire of Nightfall again, and still taking Battle Lust and Ghostwalk, but again, swap as needed. Our light and heavy are kitted similarly to the 30, but with some minor changes to the Eidolon. Here the Eidolon is getting Force Barrier, the Dawn Blade, the Dusk Blade, and the Force Cannon. Our Gast still has the Arknote, Blaster Fist, and Force Lash. To round out the 50, we're adding in more meat with a unit of Dreadguard Slayers to make use of Battle Lust, Seeker Adepts to help the Jacks, Soulless Guardians for protection and late game use of Battle Lust with a Seeker Warden to help keep them alive, and lastly a unit of Soulless Hunters. Our command cards changed a little bit and will take Breakthrough, Infiltration, Old Faithful, Power Swell, and True Inspiration. Now that we've looked at where we're starting, let's turn to where we're going. When you're ready to start expanding, you've got good options depending on where you want to go. I'd start with the Army Expansion box to give you a lot more options to play with. In that box, you'll get Tyrus, Nis Arseer of Spiders, as a second caster, a unit of Soulless Blade Masters, Dreadguard Archers, Dreadguard Cavalry, Dreadguard Sire Solo, and Dices, the Eye of Darkness Solo, who is a really great attachment. These are most all really solid and can see some good time on the table. You'll also want to pick up the Character Warjack Israfil. Note here that this is an upgrade kit, so you can either magnetize the kit and use the Eidolon chassis you already have in the starter box, or get another Eidolon chassis that you can magnetize or permanently mount the kit to a new chassis that you purchase. After getting games in with these, you'll want to maybe look at the Mercenary Solos, Iris and Prisoner 102822, as they add some nice abilities you don't otherwise have. Another great addition is the 80mm Void Engine Solo that can turn your soulless models into whites when they die, adding more utility to a cheap model. You may also want a second army box or a second expansion box if you're enjoying what those have to offer. You can also pick up any of the other casters to expand on what you have in your tool belt. Well, that's it for our intro into the Warmachine Mark IV Army, Dusk, House Callus. Let us know what you want to see next, or your hot takes by leaving us those comments below and hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Until next time.